At 0148 hours on a Thursday morning in the Persian Gulf, every radar screen aboard USS Ronald Reagan went white. Not dark, not flickering. White, a solid, blinding wall of electronic noise that stretched across every frequency band simultaneously, from the AN/SPY-1D phased array feeds on the main tactical display to the navigational radar repeaters on the bridge wing. In the Combat Information Center, 17 operators stared at screens that had, 4 seconds earlier, been showing a clean tactical picture of 23 surface contacts, 4 airborne tracks, and the steady formation geometry of the Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group. Now they showed nothing, just noise. Lieutenant Commander David Park, the watch officer, had been in the Navy for 14 years. He had run electronic warfare drills dozens of times. He had experienced partial jamming events twice during his career, localized interference from commercial shipping radar arrays that bled into military frequency bands. This was nothing like that. This was intentional, coordinated, and total. He recognized it for what it was in approximately 3 seconds. He picked up the tactical circuit handset in 4. Welcome to World Defense, the channel where we go beyond the headlines and inside the operations that shape the balance of power in the world's most volatile regions. What Iran attempted on that Thursday morning was the most sophisticated electronic warfare attack ever directed against a U.S. carrier strike group. What the United States Navy did in response, across 31 minutes and 7 simultaneous precision strikes, was a demonstration of a capability that most of the world didn't know existed. The operation had been 94 days in the planning. Iranian electronic warfare specialists operating under the IRGCN's newly activated Electromagnetic Warfare Command, established at a hardened facility 14 kilometers east of Bandar Abbas, had spent the better part of 3 months mapping the precise radar emission signatures of every vessel in the Ronald Reagan Strike Group. They had cataloged the AN/SPY-1D frequencies, the navigational radar bands, the Link 16 data link transmission windows, and the IFF interrogation cycles used by the carrier's air wing. Using this data, they had constructed a coordinated jamming package designed to saturate every active emission from every ship in the group simultaneously, not just degrade, but completely overwhelm. The system they used was a network of 7 ground-based electronic warfare sites positioned along the northern Gulf coastline and on 2 artificial platforms anchored in Iranian-controlled waters. The sites operated in coordination, each covering a specific frequency band, their combined output calculated to exceed the receiver threshold of American sensors by a factor of 30 to 1. The lead facility, Site Alpha, was located inside a reinforced concrete structure at Qeshm Island Naval Station and housed the primary jamming control system, a domestically produced platform designated Basir-3, capable of generating 400 kilowatts of broadband electromagnetic output across the S and X bands simultaneously. 6 supporting sites, designated Bravo through Gulf, were distributed along a 140-kilometer arc of coastline, each contributing between 80 and 120 kilowatts of coordinated jamming power to the collective signal. Iranian planners had calculated that 11 seconds after activation, every radar system in the Ronald Reagan Strike Group would be operationally blind. Their calculation was correct. What they had not calculated was that the United States Navy had known about every one of those 7 sites for 31 days. An EP-3E Aries II signals intelligence aircraft operating out of a forward staging base had begun systematic electronic collection against Iranian coastal emissions 6 weeks prior to the jamming event. The EP-3E is a 4-engine turboprop intelligence platform carrying a crew of 24 specialists, linguists, signals analysts, and electronic warfare officers, whose sole purpose is to collect, categorize, and geolocate electronic emissions from adversary systems. Flying at altitudes between 18,000 and 26,000 feet along carefully planned collection routes that kept the aircraft in international airspace, the crew had spent 31 days mapping every Iranian jamming site with the precision sufficient to produce targeting quality coordinates. Latitude, longitude, and elevation accurate to within 3 meters. The emission signatures, power levels, frequency plans, and activation sequences of all 7 sites had been cataloged and forwarded to Strike Group electronic warfare officers and to targeting teams at 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. A response package, 7 targets, 7 weapons, simultaneous time on target, had been pre-built, pre-approved through the full chain of command and loaded into the fire control systems of USS Ronald Reagan's embarked strike aircraft 18 days before the Iranian jamming system was ever switched on. The Americans had been waiting for Iran to activate the network. They needed them to turn it on. At 0148 hours and 04 seconds, the jamming began. At 0148 hours and 09 seconds, 5 seconds after the first white wall of noise hit the Reagan's radar screens, Lieutenant Commander Park transmitted a single brevity code on the primary tactical circuit. The code activated a pre-planned electromagnetic response posture across the strike group. At 0148 hours and 22 seconds, USS Ronald Reagan's Carrier Air Wing 1 received a launch order for a package of 4 EA-18G Growler electronic attack aircraft that had been sitting on the flight deck, engines running, for the past 47 minutes. The EA-18G Growler is the most capable airborne electronic warfare platform in operational service anywhere in the world. Built on the F/A-18F Super Hornet airframe, it carries the AN/ALQ-99 tactical jamming system in 3 external pods. Capable of generating precision jamming across multiple frequency bands simultaneously, combined with the AN/ALQ-218 wideband receiver that can locate, identify, and track electronic emission sources with targeting quality precision from a standoff range of 80 nautical miles. The aircraft can simultaneously jam enemy radar, suppress enemy air defenses, and prosecute hard-kill strikes against emitting targets, all from a single platform operating outside the engagement envelope of most surface-to-air missile systems. Each Growler in this package also carried 2 AGM-88E Advanced Anti-Radiation Guided Missiles, AARGM, weapons that home autonomously on radar and electronic emission sources and carry a 146-pound penetrating warhead capable of destroying hardened electronic warfare facilities through reinforced roofing materials. 4 Growlers. 8 AGM-88E missiles, 7 targets. The 4 EA-18Gs launched in a 90-second window, beginning at 0149 hours and 11 seconds, climbing immediately to 28,000 feet and accelerating to 500 knots on a bearing of 355 degrees toward the Iranian coastline. At the same time, Strike Group Commander Rear Admiral Thomas Kessler, operating from the Reagan's Flag Bridge, authorized the release of a second wave. 2 F/A-18F Super Hornets carrying 4 GBU-31 Joint Direct Attack munition bombs each, GPS-guided 2,000-pound weapons, tasked against the 2 largest hardened facilities in the Iranian jamming network, Site Alpha at Qeshm Island and Site Bravo, a secondary control node located inside a reinforced bunker at Bandari Pol, 23 kilometers to the northwest. At 0151 hours and 44 seconds, while the strike package was still climbing, the Reagan Strike Group received an additional electronic warfare support asset, a Navy E-2D Advanced Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft that had been airborne since 22:30 hours the previous night, operating a racetrack orbit 110 nautical miles south of the Iranian coast. Had been maintaining passive track on all 7 Iranian jamming sites since they powered up their preliminary emissions at 0144 hours, 4 minutes before they activated. The E-2D crew had watched the Iranian network come online in sequence, site by site, and had already transmitted updated target coordinates for all 7 facilities to the inbound Growler package before the strike aircraft had finished their climb to altitude. At 0153 hours, the 4 EA-18G Growlers reached their initial firing parameters at a range of 55 nautical miles from the Iranian coastline. The flight lead, callsign Raven 11, transmitted target assignments to the 3 wingmen in 5 seconds. Each aircraft selected its designated targets and confirmed weapon readiness. At 0153 hours and 31 seconds, Raven 11 transmitted the release call. 8 AGM-88E missiles left their pylons in a 12-second window. Each weapon accelerated to supersonic speed, climbed briefly to optimize its ballistic solution, and then descended toward its designated target in a steep terminal dive, homing on the electromagnetic emissions of the Iranian jamming equipment below. The AARGM has a memory function. If the target site shuts down its emissions after missile launch, the weapon continues to the last known coordinates and detonates against the physical structure. The Iranian sites could not save themselves by switching off. At 0155 hours, the Iranian jamming network operators at Site Alpha detected the inbound missile tracks on their early warning system. The Site Alpha commander issued an emergency shutdown order at 0155 hours and 14 seconds. The order reached 4 of the 7 sites. 3 sites did not receive the order in time. It made no difference. The AARGM missiles were already inside their terminal phase. At 0156 hours and 03 seconds, Site Charlie, a mobile jamming platform mounted on a modified truck chassis, positioned at a pre-surveyed firing point on the Qeshm Island coastline, took a direct hit from AGM-88E-3. The vehicle and its crew of 6 were destroyed instantly. The facility ceased electromagnetic emissions 0.3 seconds after impact, as the warhead destroyed the generator and transmitter system simultaneously. At 0156 hours and 11 seconds, Site Delta, a fixed installation inside a converted warehouse structure at Bandar Lenge, was struck by AGM-88E-4. The warhead penetrated the metal roof before detonating, destroying the primary jamming array and collapsing 2 interior walls. The secondary explosion from the facility's diesel generator fuel storage added to the destruction. The warehouse was a total loss. Sites Echo, Foxtrot, and Golf, 3 smaller supporting nodes distributed across a 40-kilometer stretch of coastline, were struck in a 19-second window between 0156 hours and 22 seconds and 0156 hours and 41 seconds. Each site received 1 AARGM impact. Each was destroyed. At 0158 hours and 44 seconds, the 2F/A-18F Super Hornets reached their weapons release parameters at 22,000 feet, 31 nautical miles from the Iranian coastline. Lead aircraft, callsign Sledge 21, released 2 GBU-31 JDAM bombs against Site Alpha at Qeshm Island Naval Station. Wingman Sledge 22 released 2 GBU-31s against Site Bravo at Bandar Pol. All 4 weapons were GPS guided to their target coordinates with a circular error probable of less than 5 meters. At 0200 hours and 17 seconds, the first GBU-31 impacted the roof of the Site Alpha facility at Qeshm Island. The 2,000-pound warhead penetrated 1.8 meters of reinforced concrete before detonating. The explosion collapsed the facility's primary structure completely. The Basier 3 jamming control system, the facility's communications node, and the primary power distribution equipment were destroyed. 3 seconds later, the second GBU-31 struck the facility's secondary structure, destroying the backup generator building and the antenna farm on the eastern wall. Site Alpha, the nerve center of the entire Iranian jamming operation, ceased to exist at 0200 hours and 20 seconds. Site Bravo at Bandar Pol was struck at 0200 hours and 31 seconds by 2 GBU-31s delivered in a 4-second interval. The bunker's reinforced concrete roof, constructed to withstand conventional air attack, was insufficient against a 2,000-pound penetrating warhead. Both weapons detonated inside the structure. The bunker collapsed. Secondary explosions from stored fuel and electronics continued for 11 minutes. At 0219 hours and 44 seconds, 31 minutes and 40 seconds after the jamming began, the last secondary explosion at Site Bravo subsided. All 7 Iranian electronic warfare sites were destroyed. The Ronald Reagan's radar screens, which had returned to full operational status within 4 minutes of the first AARGM impact as the jamming sources were progressively eliminated, were showing a clean tactical picture. 23 surface contacts, 4 airborne tracks, the strike group formation. Undisturbed, Rear Admiral Kessler transmitted his strike complete assessment to 5th Fleet at 0221 hours. The Ronald Reagan continued on her assigned patrol track. The EA-18G Growlers recovered aboard at 02:47 hours. The FA-18Fs landed at 02:51 hours. By 0300 hours, the flight deck was secured and the night cycle was complete. Senior Chief Electronics Technician Angela Marsh, who had watched her radar screens go white at 0148 hours and had spent the next 31 minutes managing the strike group's passive sensor picture from degraded systems, submitted her watch report at 0315 hours. Her notation in the remarks field read, "EW attack neutralized. All systems nominal. No friendly casualties. No damage to strike group assets." 7 words that summarize 94 days of Iranian planning and 31 minutes of American response. What this operation reveals about the nature of modern electronic warfare is this: jamming a radar screen is not the same as blinding a Navy. The United States Navy's investment in passive sensor systems, in airborne early warning platforms, in signals intelligence collection aircraft, and in pre-planned strike packages means that the moment an adversary activates an electronic attack, they also activate a targeting solution against themselves. The EP-3E that mapped those 7 sites over 31 days of collection flights was not merely gathering intelligence. It was building a kill list, one frequency signature at a time, and every hour of that collection work was being transformed directly into weapons coordinates loaded into aircraft sitting on a carrier flight deck 74 nautical miles away. The second lesson concerns the EA-18G Growler and what it represents in the electromagnetic domain. Iran constructed a jamming network that took 94 days to plan, required 7 facilities, and generated a combined output of more than 1,000 kilowatts of electromagnetic energy. The American response required 4 aircraft, 8 missiles, and 23 minutes of flight time to eliminate the entire network permanently. The investment ratio, 94 days of Iranian effort versus 23 minutes of American action, is the clearest possible illustration of why electronic warfare dominance is not just a tactical advantage, it is a strategic one. The Persian Gulf is 615 miles long and 210 miles wide at its broadest point. Every electronic emission that originates within it, every radar pulse, every communications transmission, every jamming signal, is collected, cataloged, and analyzed by American systems that operate continuously, 24 hours a day, without pause or gap. The EP-3E flights are not exceptional. They are routine. The targeting packages that result from them are not emergency responses. They are standard products, updated on a rolling basis, pre-approved and preloaded before any adversary action has occurred. For the IRGCN's Electromagnetic Warfare Command, the Thursday morning strike was not just the loss of 7 facilities and the personnel inside them. It was the loss of the institutional knowledge, the precision-calibrated equipment, and the years of trained specialist experience that had taken the better part of a decade to assemble. Replacing the hardware would take time and money. Replacing the expertise would take a generation. In the electromagnetic domain, as in every other domain of naval warfare in the Persian Gulf, the United States Navy does not share the water equally. It owns it completely, and on Thursday morning, it demonstrated exactly what that ownership means for anyone who decides to challenge it.